Good evening and welcome back to the LSK Debate for the male representative position in the JSC. In our second and last part, actually third part this evening, I want to take it now to my colleague George Maringa. He has some questions from the members of the audience. They wrote them down and he'll read the questions for us now. George.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Indeed, our audience here at the Daystar Auditorium has had a couple of questions, and I'll begin with a question from Alex Gatundu to Professor Ojenda, who asks, the Law Society of Kenya has never re-elected its representative to the JSC for a second term. Do you fear not being re-elected? And to comment that question, with another one from Murigi Kamande, who asks, has Professor Ojenda been using his position at the Judicial Service Commission to frustrate the efforts to hold him to account over the alleged corrupt conduct? That is from Murigi Kamande. We have a question to Macharia Njeru from Gladys Toroitich, who asks, the infrastructure of courtrooms across the country is pathetic. Courtrooms the size of bathrooms, courts without electricity in Bomet, open-air courtrooms with no toilets in any of the rooms, a substandard court structure in Eldoret, stalled construction in various stations. If elected on the 9th of May, what will you do to improve the situation? We also have a question here to Ongutu, who asks from Kegoli Edwin, a youth leader from Lukuyani constituency, who asks, how will you keep track of the Judicial Service Commission achievements, yet you cannot authoritatively cite a landmark case you have handled? We have a question also to Macharia Njeru, who asks, from one Stephen Ongaro, who asks, can you state the statistics on police brutality before and after IPOA came into existence, and why are more lawyers targeted than ever before? I'll throw back to my colleague Sophia Wanuna to continue with the next round of questions.
All right, thank you very much, George. So for those questions, let's get responses from our guests. We'll begin with Professor Ojenda. I'm sure you wrote them down. 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Sophia. I have no fear of re-election because a re-election is a constitutional provision under 171(4) of the Constitution. And secondly, it is the members to exercise their choice. I come to the membership to seek a second term because 4 years ago, as I said, we had 15 cadis, now we have 56. 4 years ago, we had 55 judges, now we have 155. 4 years ago, we had 352 magistrates, now we have 582. 4 years ago, we had about 3,800 judicial staff, now we have 5,900. 4 years ago, we had challenges in administering courts. We didn't have digitization. Now we have digitization full-time in the commercial and tax division. Now we have systems in the judiciary, and we have reformed the manner in which the judiciary is administered to ensure efficiency, to ensure delivery. We have a blueprint, sustaining judiciary transformation, with 7 pillars that emphasizes the removal of backlog from courts. And in the last 2 months, we have had over 170,000 cases removed through the service weeks introduced by Chief Justice Maraga. I'll tell you this, that we have outperformed ourselves as a Judicial Service Commission. 100 new constructions, 54 complete with 12 brand new projects for courts. The budget has improved from 3 billion to 17.2 billion. And we keep going. With this stellar record, a re-election is the best way to speak to your member who has outperformed himself as a corporate member of JSC. That's the first response.
All right, to you, sir. Your time is up.
Can I start by responding to some of the things he said, or should I go straight?
It will eat into your time. You have 2 minutes.
Now, let me put it this way, that one, when I hear Tom Ojenda talking about improvement in the infrastructure, I don't know whether he's talking about Kenya or another jurisdiction, because we just need to look at what is happening in Eldoret courts, where lawyers have difficulties. In fact, they address judges through the window. A lot of lawyers, especially even some who are expectant, have collapsed because of the dire situation in which that infrastructure is at. You go to a place like Bomet, where there's no power in the courts. You go to a place like Meru, where it's so congested. You go to a court in Webuye that is nearly collapsed. In fact, has been condemned. So when you talk about infrastructure, are you talking about infrastructure that has been improved in Kenya or another jurisdiction? Now, for me, it's very clear. It is a question of coming up with a matrix that where you're able to see where you need to give priority. Some of the stalled projects should really be resuscitated. Even before we talk about new courts, can we start with the areas that are in dire straits? Can we ensure that the projects that have stalled are indeed completed? My position is this, that I think one of the fundamental errors that the judiciary has done at JSC is the procurement process that is not straight, that is not efficient, and also in terms of project implementation. That needs to be handled, and I have a lot of experience in that. Now, there's the issue of police brutality. I agree. That has been a historical problem. But IPOA played a clear role in restoring dignity among Kenyans because for the first time, we're able to put in an accountability mechanism that is able to hold police to account. It is the reason why, since history of this country, there had never been conviction of police officers on police brutality. It happened under my watch as the chair. And I can tell you that when I left, it was 3 convictions, but since then there have been more. For the first time in Kenya, including sentenced police to death.
Yes. There's a rebuttal. Yes, he mentioned you on the other Kenyan courts you're talking about. Yeah, you can have 1 minute, sir.
Thank you. By way of rebuttal, the Eldoret courts. This has been in the books with a budget of over 400 million. The Eldoret courts will be on course. The delay in constructing the High Court in Eldoret was because of a title question. And there was a back and forth between the Ministry of Public Works that handled that question and the question of the sufficiency of space where we have the lower court. That project will be on course and depends on provisions of funds by the government. Mr. Mashara Njeru will not instantly go to JSC and remove money from his pockets to construct this court. This is a court that has been the concern of JSC, and soon it shall be out there. The construction will commence. The question of Webuye Court, that's also in the cards. That is, funds will be availed for that project. Again, it's a GOK project. And the same applies to the other courts that he's talked about. He's talked about, we even have plans for High Court in Kapsabet.
All right. There's a question put to you, Mr. Ongoto.
Oh, yes, there's a very interesting question. But before that, I
you
wish
have
to...
2 minutes.
Yes, I have 2 minutes. I'll do that. Before that, I think there's something I don't want to escape my mind. My 2 colleagues agreed that there's some colleagues who have been donating to them. And some of these colleagues, members, are among those who have applied to be appointed as judges and magistrates. And if they are, what will you do? Is that not one way of being compromised? Let me go to the question. One person has asked that I've never handled any roundabout case. Let me state it clearly. Every case is important to the litigant. I've handled more than 3,000 cases, and I've rose maybe 1%. That is how good I am in practice. So for JSC is not about landmark cases. It's about honesty and serving the members. And I've served members honestly. I've done many cases. I've handled serious cases, some which are reported, some which are not. But I believe I'm the best. If you look at everything, look at the compromise that is being done. A candidate is being given money by colleagues who will appear before them looking for jobs. And you want to entrust them? Forget about that. Just vote for Ngoto. Let us get it right. And we do these things right in the judiciary. For accepting and confessing that they're receiving money from colleagues, that disqualifies them. Compromise. How independent will you be? Forget about them. Vote for me. Thank you.
All right. This question comes to you, Mr. Hinga. We have had a lot of criticism directed towards the judiciary, that it has been described by key, actually, stakeholders in the criminal justice system as the weakest link. Do you agree with that assertion? And even some leaders are talking about the judiciary is the letdown when it comes to the what we now call war on corruption in Kenya. Do you agree that the judiciary is the weakest link? If yes, what should be done?
After the 2010 constitution, things are improving. And as Kenyans, we need to be also patriotic. What judiciary was there before 2010 is different somehow. But there are also those link problems you are talking about. And many people are talking about maybe a delay in justice system.
Yes.
And what we are supposed to sit down as Kenyans, like now funding, is a problem. What we are supposed to sit as Kenyans is to try and enhance the suitability of our judiciary, because it is our institution. And the problems that are rising, we don't need to go there bashing them, because it's one of the best judiciary in Africa. We have seen landmark cases coming from the judiciary. But we have those problems about funding, infrastructure, that we need now to start working on it. The criminal justice system, what is the problem? We need to re-evaluate ourselves. Firstly, we need to add staff, courts. We need to give money to the people, to the judiciary, so that they can be able to move on and also even the issues of access to justice. It's so very important, because this judiciary should work for Wanjiko. Is it working for Wanjiko?
Right.
Are there problems about corruption? What are we doing about it? And then we need transformative leadership in the judiciary, like any other institution within the Republic of Kenya.
Okay.
We have the most progressive 2010 constitution that can capture every development of our country.
Njeru, if elected to the JSC, how do you intend to safeguard the funding? He's described it in his response of the judiciary as an arm of government, to ensure that it's not in the whims of political goodwill or lack of it, that at the end of the day, it is well funded to be able to execute its mandate.
You see, Sophia, I do understand how the Public Finance Management Act operates, because remember, apart from having served in a private corporate institutions, I also served in a public institution. IPOA, incidentally, in spite of the fact that at many times we were at loggerheads with the executive in terms of holding police to account, our budget was not affected. In fact, I dare say that we started with a budget of 96 million shillings in the first year, 2012, that rose to 246 million shillings within the year. By the time I left, it had risen up to 817 million shillings. Why? We knew how to lobby with Parliament. We were able to show clear deliverables, that in as much as we need the money, that we would also be able to account for it. I can tell you, when we had an accounting officer that we had employed, after we did that, we also had clean books of account. So it is extremely critical for us to remember that it is not just the role of the executive to provide budget. It's actually Parliament. As long as you're able to convince them, you'll be able to do it. There are also very many development agencies who would be willing to assist. If they are shown that that money put to proper use, there will be clear deliverables and there will be impact. In IPOA, I was also able to do that. In fact, I was able to negotiate directly together with my team with the US Embassy, and our digital platform was financed to the tune of $6.5 million. And we were able to implement it. It's not difficult. But what I can tell you, some of these things require somebody who has experience. You don't need to go through a process to start understanding the environment. For me, I have that experience. I'm certain we'll be able to do it, and I don't think funding should just be primarily an issue. But finally, let me put it this way. There are a lot of issues within judiciary that don't require any budgeting. They don't need any budgetary consideration. They just require administrative processes. For instance, do you know many lawyers travel far and then they find the court is not sitting, yet they've not been informed in advance? That does not require money.
Professor, agenda to the question on and the criticism towards the judiciary, that is the one dropping the ball at a time when the country has been rallied in this ignited anti-graft campaign. What are your thoughts, being in the judiciary, in the JSC, the challenges that have been faced to ensure that it is delivering?
Sophia, the judiciary is the last port of call in the investigation or within the justice system. When a case is presented to court, judges and magistrates make a finding on the basis of facts and the law. The judiciary is supposed to be impartial. It does not investigate. So that you do not expect the judiciary to do anything other than decide cases fairly on the basis of what is presented before them. What should happen is that the investigative agencies, the DCI and the DPP, should properly investigate and present to court cases that can withstand the threshold and that can lead to a conviction. You cannot blame a judge or magistrate for making a finding based on facts before them. Remember, this is why judicial independence and the precept of decisional and institutional independence are important. If we cannot protect the institution and foster a strong judiciary, then the judiciary will fail in its responsibility as an arm of government. When judges and magistrates get to the point where they are influenced by the politics of the day, where they do not make decisions based on facts and law, but based on some war that is being fought, then we lose it. Because law must serve the people of today and the people of tomorrow. The Constitution, as crafted, is intended for longevity and to serve the interests of the people of this country at all times, irrespective of your position in society. It is not supposed to be for the strong or the weak, but for every person.
So a quick follow-up on that, and you have 1 minute. Are you then saying there is no merit on what we've had from the DPP, the DCI, the president himself? We've had several forums where all the stakeholders have come together, and all fingers largely have been pointed to the judiciary. So are you saying everybody else is wrong?
Sophia, you must, I don't know why you must distinguish political from judicial statements.
So even the DCI,
so that when you make
DPP,
a political statement saying the judiciary is not doing this and that, that should stop at that.
So even the DPP, DCI engaged in politics,
cases
in
are
your
never
view?
tried in public, in conferences, no. Cases are tried in court and they vary from court to court, from fact to fact, from investigation to investigation. So that bad cases must be lost on the table of the judiciary, of judges.
All right.
Good cases shall be won and convictions shall come out of them.
Mr. Ongoto, I will be coming back to you, sir. You say in your manifesto that you will improve and call upon the judiciary to have its rulings and judgment delivered on time. But the question follows on the statement you make. The public already calls for the judges to ensure expeditious delivery of justice, because then what makes you different from ordinary Wanjiko, who is not, if you're elected, sit in the JSC? So what tangible things can be done to achieve what you say you'll do?
Thank you so much. And that's a very good question. In fact, some things do not need this kind of funding we are talking about. Funding is a way, when we talk of funding, is a way of escaping from responsibility. Let me give you an example. You are here today, you want to an advocate at around 10 a.m. He's supposed to prepare your papers and go to court. He goes to court at around noon. He's told that now you can't be heard because you have filed your papers after time. That does not need funding. It only needs a proper administration, such that these cases, like if you are filing under service agents, they are heard all the time within working hours. And that should come from GSC in guiding and ensuring that there is efficient, effective, transparent, accountable judiciary. If your property is being sold, why would your property be sold when the court is supposed to work from 8 or 9 to 5. Those are things that don't need money. Those are things that you need proper action, quick action. Today, you go to court. You sit in court up to 10, 11, no appearance of a judicial officer. That does not need funding. And in fact, let me inform you, judicial officers are people obeyed on time. Have you ever heard them complain that there's a rush delayed? Why should rulings, we don't need money, judgments, be delayed? Let us
So
take
what
action.
is it you will do, sir? You have not answered my question
Yes.
on ensuring the rulings are delivered on time, because that's the promise you're giving not only
Yes.
to the society, LSK, but to Kenyans.
Yes, I've gotten it. Now, what we'll do as with my colleagues at the JSC is to follow up and give clear direction on the judicial officers that for them to serve properly the Kenyans and the advocates and the litigants, there should be no delay. And if there is delay, there should be an explanation. Without an explanation, action must be taken, because those are the problems that we are facing on a daily basis. And that is what matters to Kenyans. That I'll do that.
All right. Let me come to Mr. Irungu. I will be coming back to both of you in just a moment to talk about the question of delivery of justice and accountability of the judiciary. There's a question here from Likuyani constituency, a youth leader there, Kegoli Ayiro, says, Article 140 of the Constitution provides for timelines within which a presidential petition can be heard and determined. What effort will you reconcile to ensure economic crime cases can be heard and determined in good time? So do you think we need to have timelines, especially on the corruption cases and also economic crimes, as he says?
That's precisely a performance appraisal issue. And if you employ somebody, you need to know how your person is working. And at JSC, I think there are issues that they need now to enhance about delivery of justice. So timelines are very important. Hearings, after hearings, how long are you going to take in tendering a judgment? Those are some of the issues that must be discussed because justice delayed is justice denied. And I have no doubt that with capacity building, with funding, and with more staff, things should move on. I know that as a country we are talking about corruption, which delays development of the country. Maybe, and we have special courts about corruption, dealing with corruption. And in fact, the law is there about a day-to-day hearing. But what is happening? So these are things that now the Judicial Service Commission should come and interrogate what is happening. Because we can...
So if you're elected, you will go to begin to interrogate what the problem is,
yes,
what you're saying.
There must be a problem because everybody is complaining about it. What is happening? So that, one, we can add staff in a corruption court,
Okay.
and then we can have, like, the law is there, day-to-day hearing, and then timelines basically. But like we are saying, judiciary is also part and parcel of the other administration of justice agencies, inclusive of investigatory agencies.
All right.
So what is the problem? How do we go about it? And these are very basic questions that must be told to Wajiko because
right.
people are complaining seriously.
Thank you. So to Professor Ojenda, justice delayed is justice denied. I'll be coming back to you, Mr. Njeru. What do you say to that? You have been in the JSC. Kenyans are concerned. Matters taking too long. The delays are a big concern. So what can be done? What have you done so
Sophia,
far?
let me make this clear, and this is for the benefit of my learned friends. The day-to-day running of the affairs of the judiciary is undertaken by the Chief Justice on the one hand, who is chair of the JSC, and the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary. So that all these issues about contracts and things that run the judiciary are undertaken by these technical people. But let me say this, in terms of actualizing timelines and ensuring delivery of justice and hearing of matters, especially anti-corruption matters or corruption matters, there are timelines that have been set, and magistrates have been directed to ensure that once a case is fixed, it is heard on a day-to-day basis. But before then, directions are often taken to ensure that all documents are in order. And remember, the state, as the prosecutor, must be prepared to proceed. And dates have been fixed for all matters, and once fixed, they are supposed to proceed. So the judiciary has acted to ensure that cases are heard timelessly, and most of these cases involve a lot of documents, and they must be prepared. The best solution to avoid some of the delays that I see in court of adjournments being sought because documents have already been supplied is that a case should be fully prepared and then presented to court. I myself was arrested on 28th of December 2018, and investigations commenced the next day. You know, so you also don't target. Targeting must also be avoided, where you just target a person for political reasons.
But Prof, what then do you say to the point of the judges, magistrates, judicial officers who are not present? Everybody's ready, they're not in court.
Sophia, Article 168 of the Constitution is very clear. You must complain. Magistrates and judges have names. Ongoto cannot say magistrates generally. I appear before judges and magistrates who come to court at 9 a.m. The Supreme Court is always present at 9 on the dot. The Court of Appeal judges, 9 on the dot. The High Court judges, the judges that are
so people are not complaining.
It depends on which court they're talking about. Judges have names. You cannot keep saying judges and magistrates are absent. They have names. Complain. And we shall take measures. In 2018 alone, we dismissed 13 magistrates. In 2018.
Okay.
And we dealt with 78 complaints against judges. Why can't those who are saying judges don't come to court complain?
All right.
You can't just complain and sit back. There's also a bar bench committee where you can present these questions.
Mr. Njeru, to the question of timely delivery of justice is crucial. Many Kenyans out there waiting years on year to have justice delivered. What will you do if elected?
You're right. You know, Sophia, the biggest problem is that we all understand what are the issues. Ordinary litigants, lawyers, everybody. It is the how question, how to resolve it, that my colleagues don't have similar experience that I have in resolving them. I'll tell you what is the issue here, because I sat in the National Council for Administration of Justice, representing IPOA as one of the institutions that was sitting there. There are no systems and processes that function in a manner that you can monitor, evaluate, and appraise judicial officers. What they call monitoring process is some manual returns of some sort. You need a system that is automated, where you can be able to capture an errant officer in terms of how they perform. When they are not able to deliver timely decisions, the system will be able to pick it up. You will have key performance indicators that inform the concerns of litigants and also the lawyers as big stakeholders. If you do not have systems and processes, you will continue complaining and will never have a solution. That is what is lacking. I can tell you, judiciary does not have an ERP, enterprise resource planning, system that is functional so that it can be used in terms of monitoring, evaluating, and appraising officers. We need to have that. I have a lot of experience in doing that. And let me tell you, Sophia, how does it explain that there's a rule that says that you must deliver a judgment within 42 days? And there are so many of us as lawyers who are waiting for 2 years, 3 years. It's totally unacceptable. It can't happen. In fact, I dare say, in a corporate organization that is answerable to shareholders, if judiciary was like that, it would have been wound up. We need that to be put urgently. And I can be able to assist in putting that process. Digitization is something else that is missing. It has been tried. I don't know what my learned colleague here is saying when he says that digitization has already taken effect. Any lawyer will tell you it is not there. It has been tried. It has failed. In IPOA, we're able to achieve it within 18 months. It is not rocket science. Other government organizations are already doing it. They're online payment solutions. We can do it also in the judiciary.
All right. You can rebuttal 1 minute, then we'll go to audience questions. So, digitization, and as you respond, let me read this question that came because it was an area we were to discuss digitization. The government and many private institutions have moved most of the services online. Only elected, how will you ensure, if elected once, well, for you it's re-elected, how will you ensure complete digitization of the judiciary services, even in remote stations without electricity? What best practices will you borrow from? This is a question from Nathaniel Mongare from Nairobi.
Digitization is already on course, and I said the Commercial and Tax Division is already digitized as of 19th of April 2019. We already have 78 law firms in pilot, rather on board, and Kisumu and Mombasa courts are pilot. In fact, in the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, already you make sure that you avail both hard and soft copies. You pay electronically in the Commercial and Tax Division. And remember, funds have to be availed for this process. By December 2019, we contemplate or we expect that most of the high courts in this country will have been digitized. Now, Mr. Masharia's lack of knowledge of what happens in the judiciary does not mean that it is not happening. Enterprise Resource Funding, ERP, is already on course. It is a systems program, it is already on course, but we already have something called performance management systems that assesses the work of judicial officers through returns. That's already on course.
All right. We will go to audience questions. George, over to you.
Thank you, Sophia. Indeed, you're having an evening of questions. And earlier on, we had asked specific questions to the contestants, but now we have, general questions that have been asked by a good number of the audience. And the first question to all the contestants is, have you been subject of any disciplinary complaint, conviction, or suit? That is, have you been subject of any disciplinary complaint, conviction, or suit? Number two is that, what is your understanding as contestants on fostering judicial independence? Is there a threat by the executive to curtail judicial independence? And the third question is that, away from discussing the JSC, is that what, if elected, all of you, or to each of the contestants, if elected, what plans do you have for the young advocates in Kenya?
We'll start over with you, Mr. Ongoto, to the question of disciplinary action, whether there's any you face, and perhaps you can tie that in with whether you perceive there's interference of the judiciary independence by the executive. 2 minutes.
Thank you. As I've said, I've not faced any disciplinary action or an action taken on me and convicted. The other thing is about independence of the judiciary. One thing I believe is the independence of the judiciary starts as from the time we are recruiting or appointing judicial officers. If we appoint judicial officers based on friendship, nepotism, and the donations that they have made, the same way they have made to my colleagues, the independence starts dying from there. Because we are not able to determine the right people, because we have some bias. This one helped me, this one did not. So we must, at the point of appointing judicial officers, do it honestly and diligently. That's when we can achieve that independence. What was that question?
About the independence of the judiciary.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that, let me tell you, colleagues, the independence of the judiciary, if today, let me give you an example how we lose it. If today you appear in the judiciary and there's a conspiracy, one, the 3 or 4 friends in the JSC will give you higher marks because you donated. The rest will give you based on merit. On that way, you win. You become a judge or a magistrate. How independent will you be? That's where we must start. Any judicial officer who is appointed on merit must remain independent no matter what. And that's what we expect. And I appeared before most of these courts, and most of them are very independent. It's only that a few who may be influenced, but I believe, given a chance, I will ensure fairness in appointment.
And I want to go with the point you've just made now as I put this question to you, Prof. Ojenda, because you have been in the JSC. How can it safeguard against abuse of the personal discretion members have when voting? He's given an example. If there's voting, one JSC member gives 10 marks, another gives 99 marks. The question there would be, what is a statistical equity or scientific process that can defend the outcome of such a process? So how do you protect from that abuse of the discretion you have as a member?
Before undertaking any interview for any position, JSC commissioners meet and discuss the parameters of the questions and the specific headers that are examined and assign those questions to a specific commissioner. In certain interviews, you have independent assessors also coming in where there's need for some specialized expertise. Now, JSC commissioners, of course, are independent commissioners. They are women and men of integrity. They are women and men of direction and of papers, and are able to correctly assess the candidates within their conviction. There's never conspiracy, and once a discussion has occurred and the candidate has presented, then they are marked fairly. I was dealing with that question before I go to these other questions. So I hope time starts.
Well, I don't think you all have to answer the questions because we still have to continue with the rest. But yes, you can go on with the 1 minute.
Yeah, let me start with the rest. Now, on the, I have not had a complaint that has landed me before the disciplinary committee for misconduct, eating clients' money, misbehaving with clients' money, or borrowing clients' money either temporarily or permanently. But I have had suits where I have sued investigative agencies like the DCI,
Right.
and where there was a real threat of action being taken, one on the basis of historic cases without a basis, but largely because of my conduct in the JSC, because I believed that all that I have faced in the last few months are cases that are made up and that were intended to stop me for running for JSC. They were so deliberate. A case picked 10 years ago on Mumia Sugar that I did fake cases, which cases I did in the Court of Appeal. I defended those cases. The cases are on EKLR, for God's sake. Why didn't the investigators check out the numbers and confirm that those cases are on EKLR? It is very upsetting that such cases should find themselves in court. But let me go to the second case. The second case was against KRA. Again, this is a very painful case. In 2016, I sued KRA for purporting to ask of me extra taxes of 343 million shillings, that is from a factory, asking on the basis of bills of course I had filed. I go to court, I win the cases. Those claims are quashed by the judge. In 2018, after 3 years, KRA comes and says that unless I pay the sums they demanded in those cases, I can't get a tax compliance. This is important. Let me just finish, because this is important.
But also matters before court.
Yeah, this is important. The matter is before court. But even as the matter is before court, I am told that I should pay when I've won a case.
1 minute.
Now, 1 minute on judicial independence. It is because of my character in sustaining judicial independence as a member of JSC that I've been the subject of all these run-ins with investigative authorities. It's so basic. They want me out of here. For that reason, vote for me. Lastly, for young lawyers, I have a mentorship program running of the interest of lawyers. I'm a law teacher. I have taught these young advocates. I've published in the areas of law of conveyancing, professional ethics. I'm a man of integrity with a history. I have plans for these guys because we work together seamlessly. I have a program that is intended for the future. And this does not depend on the JSC. Whether I win or lose, my mentorship program is on course. Okay. It will benefit young lawyers to ensure that they grow up and are able to tap into the profession and to learn the etiquette and the good manners as they grow up. And remember, mentorship is about cross-learning, young and old alike. Thank you, Sophia.
Jared.
Let me start by saying this, that I've never been subjected to any disciplinary process anywhere, and I've practiced for 28 years, which is a long time. I've never been under any criminal investigation whatsoever. There has never been any finding that is adverse against me. And let me mention something that is very critical here. To have served in a government institution for 6 years and come out unscathed as the chair of an institution that had a clean track record in this country today is a remarkable achievement in itself. Never, nothing adverse against me. There was an attempt recently, during these elections, for my name to be tainted, where propaganda was being brought across in some old civil matter that happened in 1995, 23 years ago, trying to impute something adverse against our law firm. And the Court of Appeal was very clear that our law firm was cleared. In fact, it was ordered that we be paid costs. There was nothing criminal. It was purely a civil dispute between a vendor and a purchaser. I've had a very clean record, which I intend to maintain. And I think it is very important when you're talking about this position of JSC. There should be no integrity issues because you are moving into an institution that is oversighting judiciary. Let me come to the issue of judicial independence. Again, I have a clean record when it comes to that. When I was in IPOA, we were able to hold both the executive and police to account. You remember there was the famous case of 10,000 police officers who were being recruited, and it was corruptly carried out, and we moved to court and challenged it, even caused the cancellation of that matter. So it is quite clear that if it is anybody who has been able to show by deed that I can be accountable, I can hold executive to account, I can hold anyone else to account, I can do it. What we need to be worried about, and this I must say, in the judiciary today, is the cartels. Even the Chief Justice admitted there has been cartels.
And let me do a follow-up as you talk about that, because your manifesto, you say, yes, you'll fight corruption cartels, whether private, commercial, organized crime, or non-state actors. How?
The first thing to make sure that we do that,
1 minute, yeah.
Let us make sure that any JSC member, firstly, does not appear in court, so that you don't start pulling deals with the judicial officers. To me, that is very critical. JSC itself must be clean. And as long as there's any perception, even the slightest perception, that a JSC member can influence what happens, that is a problem in itself. Then also we need to ensure there's a system and process that disciplines errant officers so that we're able to show that action will be taken against those officers who don't do the right thing. When it comes to the issue of the young lawyers, what they need is level playing field. That is not there. I can tell you, Sophia, today, the system is so rigged against young lawyers, it is practically impossible for them to make it. If we don't sort that out, there will be a problem. 28 years ago, when I became a lawyer, do you know, within a year of post-admission, I started a law firm. I was able to buy a house. I was able to buy a brand new car. Why? We were treated fairly by judicial officers. There was no influence peddling, which is happening now.
Okay.
There are clients who go specifically looking for certain lawyers who they know will influence how matters will go. We can't afford that for young lawyers. Mr.
Irungu, to the questions that were put out.
Thank you. On young lawyers, in our community we have a saying that a head without the young ones will get finished. That should also be part and parcel of our policies towards the young, inclusive of employment. These issues about experience and all that, you get experience because you are employed. So we need to think so much about the young lawyers, level playing ground, and even giving work, like what the government has about 30%. We need to think about it so that our youth
So how would you apply that in the legal practice?
We have, for JSC, where we are going, okay, the Law Society has failed on that, whatever, but for JSC, we need to put the 30% or so promotion, appointment for the youth. That
so even if they're unqualified?
There is no question about qualification. The issue is that when you talk about experience, because basically, if you're going to Judicial Service Commission, you are going there because you're qualified. If it's about magistrate, you only need a degree in law. So about experience of 3 years, 5 years or so, that should end. On judicial independence, for those who practiced so many years ago when dictatorship was live in the country, we remember when people were being taken to court at night without legal representation. A strong judiciary is the bulwark against the dictatorship of the state. And I have no doubt that we must have what we call institutional and decisional independence of the judiciary. Okay. That includes how we promote, appoint, and discipline our judiciary. Mm-hmm. Judicial officers should not have any fear of their JSC employers.
Yeah.
And I thought everybody was
yes.
added.
Okay, I can give you 30 seconds briefly.
I was so happy. ICJ, the other day, we did have a launch of a book 60 days of independence. I was so happy one day that I saw Justice CJ Maraga standing and saying they were ready to pay the ultimate price so that independence of the judiciary could be protected. But we have those issues. And for JSC, they must be very strong against the political class, against anybody who is coming in between the judicial independence. Because if we don't have it, then we are doomed.
I'll come to you, Mr. Ongota, and we will be continuing. Rebuttal on what point?
I've heard of cartels. Let me respond because
he did not mention you, the cartel, unless you're suspecting yourself.
There's a term of art that I hear used in the judiciary.
1 minute.
I think cartel, the so-called cartels, the faceless allegation or statement about cartels. A cartel would have advocates and judges. Why can't cartels have names? Why can't those who are involved in influencing cases, even if they are agents outside court, be identified so that we say we will fight this judge and that judge who are part of a cartel that is selling justice in the courts? You cannot have a faceless cartel and say we are going to the judiciary to fight cartels or that there are cartels in court. Lastly, I wanted to mention this. 28 years ago, the Advocates Act provided that you practice for 2 years before opening your law firm.
All right, to the question I was going to ask Mr. Rongoto, there was a long delay and sort of standoff in the gazetting of Judge Warsame to the JSC. And in fact, the executive, the president, had wanted him to be vetted. And so the JSC was not fully constituted for quite some time. Also, the members from the public who are nominated by the president were not sworn in as well. How, in your view, can the independence and of the JSC be protected from this kind of quote-unquote overtures?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. You realize what the president was doing was trying to control JSC. Justice Warsame was elected by the churches, and he was not supposed to be subjected to any vetting process having sat in the JSC. But we have this tendency by the executive to try and control the JSC. I think JSC must remain independent and very active. We must, and I'm happy that the courts, they went to court and the court declared that as a long position taken by the executive. That's why we need independent people at the JSC. In fact, whenever there is a problem and there is the president or the executive tries to break the law, we have always moved to court, and I've seen JSC moving and other institutions move to court to protect that independence. And in fact, the executive must know that they cannot act in a vacuum. That kind of impunity expressed by the president will not work. And if I'm a member of JSC, even paying of court orders, we should not have people who express some impunity that is not good for this country. And even the executive must always respect independent institutions and follow the law. You see, you can't. This is why you see this country today, everybody is careless. Everybody does not want to follow the law. It's because from the head, if the president of a country and another executive officer does not obey the law, and it is not fear telling them, follow the law, and those below you will follow the law. And that's what I will urge while serving as a judicial a male representative at the JSC.
Right.
That must never be compromised. In fact, let me add this.
Yes.
If you compromise and you try to control the judiciary, then everybody is in a problem. Because that's where we go for the reprieve. You can be arrested without even any cause because somebody doesn't want you.
All right.
Give me a second. I thought you have been adding some seconds to some people.
30 seconds.
Yes, that's seconds. So, when you see anybody blaming the judiciary, trying to undermine the judiciary, you should know that you yourself as an individual, your life is in danger.
All
and
right.
you must support independence of the judiciary, no matter what. That's where we run to.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Njeru, to that point, and you know the double standard has been clear for all to see, that when you see members of the executive not obeying court orders, ordinary Mwananchi does not have that latitude. They must. If they don't, there are consequences. So what needs to happen, as you also respond to the question of what we saw happen with Judge Orsame?
Now, first and foremost, in IPOA, I give a direct example of the police recruitment case, which we filed when we couldn't agree with the executive regarding the accountability mechanism around it. We got an order, and I recall that the executive opted to appeal to the Court of Appeal. They went there. In fact, I recall at one time, police attempted to go ahead with the recruitment, notwithstanding the existence of the court order. We threatened the Inspector General with citing him for contempt, and they stood down and they repeated the process. So what is very critical is the people who obtain these orders, or people who are behind them, to ensure that they fall through the whole process. I have that track record. It's extremely important for us to be clear about one thing. It's so easy to say, I'll do this, I'll do that when I get there. Where is the track record? That's where we need to be very clear about, and I have that track record. The issue of Justice Orsame, that has been determined. I agree with the decision, the way it was made. It's quite clear. So at the end of the day, what is important is for us to ensure that there's fidelity to the law. But I must say this, Sophia. If we do not sort out also the issue of the non-state actors, the cartels, as I'm saying, my colleague here is saying that they don't exist. We as lawyers know it. The members of the public know that this is a big problem. The Chief Justice has admitted and said that this is a big problem of the cartels. So I'm wondering, where does he live? Because as a matter of fact, this is something that is acknowledged. If we do not acknowledge this is a problem, how are we going to resolve them? That's why I'm saying systems and processes is what is critical in terms of ensuring we institutionalize, we start a new culture. He keeps talking about statistics of high court buildings, this and that. What about the culture of the institution? You can have all the buildings that you talk about. You can have all the number of officers that you recruit. But if there's no culture of accountability, you have a culture, a brand that is built in an institution, those buildings, those numbers, I can tell you, will count for nothing. It's not about the quantity. It's about the quality. It's about the service delivery.
All right. Prof, in rejoinder, is it your statement tonight that there is no corruption in the judiciary?
No, I said that when you deal with, you ask the question about cartels, they have names. When you talk about corruption in the judiciary, corruption is perpetuated by specific judicial officers and specific judicial staff. They have names. Article 168 of the Constitution speaks to a mode of complaints. We have the ombudsman, a whole office set up under the law. And the organizational structure of the judiciary, having established the ombuds, encourages complaints, either formal or informal, to the judiciary. They are investigated. Day in, day out, where there are allegations, the Chief Justice and the Chief Registrar of the judiciary deal with corruption allegations and reports instantly. Okay. We hear those cases, as I said, we fired 13 magistrates, we dealt with 78 complaints against judges, and we continue to do that on a daily basis. Now, let me move to say this. Of course, that is not just the judiciary. The corruption is in every arm of government, and there are mechanisms for dealing with it. But let me go to the question of Orsame, because that is a question I'm sure we want to deal with. The question of Judge Orsame was about the interpretation of Articles 248 and 250 of the Constitution on whether, and Section 40 of the Judicial Service Act, JS Act. It's a question as to whether, first of all, the need for whether a JST commissioner is an appointed or an elected official. The Court of Appeal elected Judge Orsame, and he was entitled to assume his office. And since he was serving a second term, he did not need to be gazetted at all.
All right.
So that decision, as I said, was correct. But again, the question of judicial independence come to fore. When a commissioner is not liked, if you could have me 30 seconds.
Tafadhali, we'll come back to you for closing statements because I have 2 minutes to closing statements. I need to come back to the point you made to challenge then what you're saying is people should move to court with specifics on these cartels. So Njeru, in 30 seconds. Do you have evidence on these cartels? We'll be coming back to you and you can use the closing statements 1.5 minutes to address that final point. So do you have evidence that you would seek to present on these cartels you talk about tonight? 30 seconds.
Sophia, lawyers have presented complaints to the Judicial Service Commission. But I can tell you again, it's the issue of systems and processes. They do not have a vibrant complaints department. They do not have a vibrant investigation department. They have 2 investigating officers seconded to them by the CID. This is an institution that is a decade old. It doesn't have organizational structure. It doesn't have systems. It doesn't have processes. How will they have created the confidence of members of the public, including lawyers, that when complaints are presented, they will be acted upon?
Okay.
That is the problem.
Your final statement, Mr. Irungu, is there corruption in the judiciary? How should it be dealt with? After that, we'll go to closing remarks.
Thank you. Everybody knows there is corruption, inclusive of even the Chief Justice has said about it. We have had the Ringera and other commissions dealing with it. And you remember the sacking of the judiciary. So it is there. And it's not even judiciary alone, it's all over. And these are some of the issues that we must discuss as a nation on how to go about it. One of the issues that I feel so strong about is that we need a complaints system. Because majority of people do not know how to complain. One, Judicial Service Commission is in Nairobi. We need the desks.
The Ombudsman office is not sufficient?
Many people don't even know about how to go about it.
Okay.
So we need Judicial Service Commission desks at counties, and we need, like now there was a matter, one of our lawyers who complained 3 years ago. Nothing has happened. We need to see what is happening immediately.
All right.
Do we have closing remarks?
Yes, but
After.
we'll start there. Actually, it's supposed to be you starting, sir. So yes, we have come to the end of our debate because we will start our closing remarks in order of the ballot. And as you make your closing remarks, Irungu Gadi, I wonder if you'd shared with your fellow lawyers who will be involved in the voting come Thursday, a manifesto which you did not share with us to allow us to interrogate what you would do.
My manifesto has been sent to all lawyers, and I'm happy that we are... one of us here will be in that seat on Thursday. He will represent us, and that one person is me. And we need to be an example, Law Society of Kenya, to the other country. We don't want an election that now becomes a problem like our political elections, so that we can move on. And whoever is going to be elected amongst us is going to represent all of us and the Law Society of Kenya. And the good thing about it is that I want a link between Judicial Service Commission and the lawyers, so that the aspirations can be fulfilled through me. My first experience, both as a lawyer, mediator, arbitrator, should not be thrown to the dustbin. It should be used by my colleagues and lawyers. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Njeru, as you make your closing remarks, there was a question Oti Abaye had asked. I have heard as the campaigns were going on that Mr. Njeru is a government candidate preferred by this state. Your closing remarks, as you also address that.
Yeah, you'll add me a little more time.
You can take 30 to 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Sophia, I have a track record. I'm the only candidate here who has shown by deed of what I did in terms of sustaining independence on the institution that I served. It is there in public domain. Let us not use somebody's name as a reason to say that that's a government project just because my name is Macharia. It's part of the propaganda, because these are people who have nothing else that they can point out against Macharia and Njeru, but have a clean track record. Others, I can tell you for a fact, don't have the same. And they need to tell us specifically the clear instances that can be held, where they can say they were held to account in terms of sustaining that judicial independence. I'm the only one who has been able to do it. Let me put it this way as my closing remark. The position of JSC representative for lawyers is the most critical position, because you are the person to ensure that the needs of lawyers, the bread and butter issues, are handled in the judiciary so that they can have better practice conditions. I can tell you lawyers are suffering a lot. We've never had somebody who has experience in setting up corporate governance structures that are sustainable, putting in systems and processes, ensuring there is an accountability mechanism that works, including performance management, digitization, and the other issues. Lawyers have, for the first time, somebody who has practice experience for 28 years, but also experience in running vibrant institutions. IPOA was voted the best public institution in 2017 by members of the public through a very transparent mechanism. If I do come in, I assure lawyers that we'll put in those systems, processes, we'll ensure this level playing field. We'll ensure we have a judiciary you can be proud of. I will serve you diligently. I'm not looking for a job. I need to make that very clear. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not in this position for financial gain. I will serve with integrity. I'll serve with honor. I'll make sure I'm accountable to lawyers. Do you know, since we started having representatives, they've never held themselves to account to lawyers. Okay. This will happen under me.
Tom, agenda.
Thank you, Sophia. What lawyers must look for on Thursday when voting is to ensure that you do not enhance the number that the executive has in the judiciary. They already have 4, that is the 2 that the president appoints, the Attorney General, and the member of the Public Service Commission. If you make a mistake and elect a member who is close to government, then you'll have added a 5th member to the number of government. I urge you to look for that independent member when you're voting, and that is myself. I have a track record of service as President, Law Society, where I introduced a new remuneration order that has enhanced the life of lawyers. I completed the purchase of Gitanga Center, where the Law Society resides. I am the one who introduced continuing legal education in the Law Society of Kenya. That's a track record. At JSC, I have shown how in the last 5 years, JSC has moved miles. Now we have judicial officers, we have systems that work. We have embraced digitization and improved efficiency, and we deal with complaints against judicial officers while we acknowledge the faults. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your best bet for election to the JSC for a 2nd term. Elect me and you will not regret. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ongoti, you get the final word. And as you speak, you have described yourself as the candidate of the silent majority. Yes. Are you concerned that they may decide to remain silent over you on election day?
No, thank you so much. The silent majority is ready. on 9th, by the way, they will make it very loud and clear that they cannot be influenced by way of parties, hangouts, and all those things. They have made a decision. This is a time for the silent majority who want a working, effective, efficient, transparent, and accountable judiciary. That's all. And what I can tell you, I'm the best in this. You've heard my colleagues taking where they have served. At a certain point, one must be given a responsibility to serve. Mr. Machele and Chiro was in the IPOA, but still he left there with a lot of problems.
Which
a lot of problems at IPOA. In my my professor here, a good friend of mine, is at JSC. You hear complaints every day about it is time to give a new person an opportunity to serve. And actually that person is Ongoto, not anybody else. Because if they have served in positions and those positions have problems to date as we speak, what else can they do? We need a new person, a neutral person. As you have heard, one is called a government project, another call has been told us what, I don't know. But I don't want to create suspicion on anybody. I respect all of them, but one thing I can tell them, they should be ready to go home on 9th May and read the silent majority deliver on behalf of lawyers. Right. I'm the best, I have the best, just a minute. I have the best experience.
Your time is up,
for 19 years without any complaint, without any problem. Please, lawyers all over the country, vote for me. Thank you so much.
Because of the rules, a rebuttal 30 seconds. But this was a closing statement, but he has chosen to mention your names.
Now, Sophia, now one thing is that I said IPOA won the awards of being the best public institution and also the FIRE awards from the public. That can never be better than that. Now, regarding him, he has said that he's the best in terms of judicial independence. Remember there was the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, where a whole chapter, he was accused, Tom, and you know that, you are accused, and this is something you never challenged, of interfering with the whole chapter on historical injustices on land issues. He was accused by his fellow commissioners. There was even a book written with the whole chapter on him, allegedly on being under pressure from executive. For me, I have never been accused of such.
Okay. The time is up. Final.
Can I just respond to this? Let's clear this once and for all.
30 seconds of rebuttal.
What was in the chapter was,
Or rather 1 minute.
we were accused that we removed the name of Kenyatta family and the Kikuyu as having been the only people who allotted land at the coast. That was factually untrue. And as the chair of the land chapter, I simply led the last audit of the final chapter that we presented to His Excellency the President. There was no, I don't pledge. I do not pledge. Why have I been arrested 3 times or threatened with arrest? It is because of the fear of my independence. And because, remember, Sophia, on the 22nd of September 2016, I announced the name of the Chief Justice, Maraga, after interviews, when there was an attempt to interfere with that list. That has been the cause of my problems. To date, I stand for judicial independence, get it right, and I have done this for over 20 years. That is where you go wrong.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We have come to the end of our debate this evening. Irungu Gadhi, asante sana for being with us. Macharia Njeru, Professor Tom Ojenda, and Charles Ongoto. It has been a pleasure moderating this debate with all of you. Please shake hands after all of whatever has been said. It's all good. We're looking forward to the 9th of May for that election. And thank you, members of the audience, for being with us. Asanteni sana. A clap for yourselves for keeping and honoring the rules this evening. Indeed, we had a very good debate. Thank you so much. Remember, this was the first ever televised debate on Kenyan soil, Kenyan television, of the LSK debate from male representative to the JSC. Thank you so much to the entire team. It takes a village to have this kind of a production. So everybody that makes this show possible, we thank you so much. My name is Sophia Wanuna. We wish you a good night and God bless.